Good evening. We're going to go ahead and get ready to get started. If you'll take your seat, please. I'd like to make sure we start on time and then. So I'll call the Home Rule Charter Advisory Committee meeting to order. If General Ernst, would you mind giving us a prayer, please? All right, would you call roll, please? So we have a quorum?
Present, we have a quorum.
Great, thank you. I need a motion or a review first, if you want, the approval of the minutes of the last meeting. We have a motion? Second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? So moved. All right, unfinished business. Review of the prior meeting, website, email addresses. That's now on the website. I saw it the other day. Our meeting schedule is all now been posted. And then at this time, I would welcome any public comment prior to our meeting as we discuss topics or anything we talked about last month. If you'd like to say anything, we'll open the mic for you now. If not, that's okay. We'll wait till we get into other discussion. New business, we're going to do item, I think, B because of time constraints, correct, is what I was told?
Yes.
Yeah. So presentation and discussion of the charter changing process. David, I apologize. They've got to leave early. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Carrie Menard here on normally be advising you legally. She put together a PowerPoint presentation. It's not very long at all, but I'll be happy to present it to you. Are we broadcasting? Good, it's there. So this is the outline of the charter amendment process. It's pretty straightforward. The authority to amend the charter comes from the Constitution, from the Louisiana Revised Statutes, and as well as the Home Rule Charter itself. The Constitution says that it can be adopted, amended by a vote of the people. The revised statutes talk about the fact that these amendments can come from a charter review committee or charter review commission, which we don't have, but we have the advisory committee to the council here, and your advice and recommendations will be made to the parish council, who will then at some point put it on the ballot for the people. And Part B says the proposed changes in the charter shall be approved by a majority of the electorate here in the parish. So the St. Tammany Parish Home Rule Charter, Section 701, regulates who can propose the amendments. As I mentioned, it can be done by 2/3 or 10 members of the authorized membership of the parish council, which is likely the way this will be handled, or it can be done by referendum, by not less than 20% of the total registered voters of the parish. So there are certain time delays involved in putting the proposals before the people. The council must publish the proposed amendments in the official journal within 30 days of certification of a petition, if it was by petition or by the council vote. And then thereafter, there has to be a delay of at least 30 days before an election would be held, which is likely how it would be. Section 701 of the Home Rule Charter states that a majority, obviously 50% plus one of all the electors voting on the proposals are required in order to have a charter amendment. There'll be multiple proposals, as you are aware, to amend the charter, which may be submitted to the voters all at the same election. Some of the other issues that Washington Parish ran into when they attempted to amend their Home Rule Charter was that there were so many amendments. At one point, I think it was in excess of 100 amendments, where they ultimately had to decide whether or not they were going to put individual amendments or try to amend the charter in its entirety. They elected to put it on the ballot in its entirety with all the amendments under one proposal, and it did not pass. The voters did not pass that. And then if there are conflicting proposals, at the same time, the proposal receiving the greater number of affirmative votes shall prevail to the extent of such a conflict. For instance, it could come down to how large the parish council should be. Should it be maintained at 14? Should it be 9? Should it be 7 or 5? You can put multiple proposals on, and then whichever proposal receives the most votes would be passed by the electorate. And there are certain time limitations. Once a proposal is put on the ballot, it cannot be brought up again. That topic cannot be brought up for amendment to the Home Rule Charter within a 2-year period. Most people are interested in the next one. No amendment or repeal shall shorten the term for which an incumbent official was elected or reduce the salary for the office of that elected official. So should the council ultimately reconstitute the parish council, it will not affect any of the seating incumbents on the council. And then, of course, nothing in the charter can conflict with the Constitution or general state law. And I said it was a short presentation, and that's it. Do we have any questions about that, about the process that I might be able to answer or further research for the committee?
Just so everybody understands your last comment, no amendment or repeal shall shorten the term. So
Yes.
No matter when this would go to a vote, the election, the terms that they have right now will continue until the end of this next term.
That is correct.
Correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead.
Carrie, quick question. In terms of the terms of the official, so say for example we reduce the size of the council, would that kind of reset the term limits then? Because so if one of us who's an incumbent member, if we propose to reduce the size of the council, well, my district's no longer my district,
Right.
So basically you've reset the count in terms on term limits, correct?
That's my understanding, yes.
Perfect. And Larry?
Yeah, one question, if I could. So based on that same theory he was talking about, I know we do a census like every 10 years, is it?
Right.
Would that have to align with that census because of redistricting also, or?
It wouldn't necessarily have to align, but it sure would make it easier if
Right,
the timing
okay.
worked out, that there would be redistricting at the same time that the new charter would go into effect.
And also any type of amendment or any change that would be maybe that goes to the voters and approved. It wouldn't necessarily have to be for the next term coming up. It could be 2 terms from now.
Not
or
necessarily.
It could be 10 years from now.
They could have a time,
They
yeah.
could have a time like.
An implementation period, yes.
Exactly. Okay, thanks. I kind of thought so, but I wasn't sure.
We would have to have that in the petition.
In the proposal
Stating
itself,
when you would want that to happen.
to take effect, that's
Yeah.
correct. Effective dates for the various positions.
Yeah. But you don't have to wait till the census.
No, sir.
Yeah. Okay. Any other questions?
Mr. Shane?
Yeah, Mr. Shane?
Yes, sir. Thank you for your presentation. Good information.
Oops,
Yes,
hold
sir.
on, you have to push your button again. Kevin turned you on.
Yeah.
There you go.
I keep trying to turn you on. I turn you off.
Do it again. Okay, you're on.
See what rookies do? Help me out, and maybe all of us, but just under the hypothetical, if this committee were to recommend, and if the council were to so choose to put an amendment before the electorate, reducing the number of members of our council, I'm just going to pick a number and go from 14 to 12.
Mhm.
And assuming that the timeline for that change would not be at the next census, but would be perhaps, say, at the end of the current 4-year terms that the council and administration are finishing, I guess, in the beginning of year 2. Who's responsible for making the reallocation of the districts, and what third-party government bodies, if any, have to be a part of that?
Jeff, I don't know the answer to that, and that's something we'd have to research. I really don't know the answer.
Is that
But
not
that's-
a critical question as it relates to if we shrink the council?
Sure.
Presumably we create
New districts.
new districts, which means you have to get the pencil out and redraw the maps, et
Correct.
cetera, or to some extent. So, well, I mean, we're not there yet, but I think that's something that everybody better keep a note of,
Yeah, I would
Right.
think.
because that could bear into our discussion,
Yeah.
though, about possibly reducing the council. I think
Right.
we might need to know what the process would be, who's involved, how long it would take.
Under the present charter, the council actually does the redistricting.
Does their own redistricting.
Right. So my thought process is it would be the same. But you would, if you're writing that and reducing the number or adding, making more, whatever you're doing, you're going to have to change the charter and state that they, again, will have to do this. And it will be a responsibility of the council.
I think it might be nice if y'all could look into that and confirm probably this idea, because I think that's going to be an important piece of the discussion at the right time.
Will
Yeah.
do.
Ms. Tanner?
Okay, what we did last time is the council hired the consultant, and the council members really kind of, some of us was together if we had boundaries the same and all, but mainly the council, excuse me, and the consultant handled all the redistricting. So, like I say, it wasn't 14 in there. It depended on what area they were doing to draw the lines.
Yeah, that's the way this existing charter. I think what we all need to try to remember is every time we look at a change, there's probably going to be other parts of the charter that are going to have to be changed also to make sure that we're creating exactly what you all want. Mr. Rowan?
Yes, one last thing, since you might be doing some research.
Uh-huh.
Talking about those districts, the boundaries of these districts, and I know in the past I've had some legal, qualifications, and sometimes judges decide on certain areas and how they're drawn up. So maybe if you can find out, as I know you're gonna probably reflect on some of these other questions, that who would be the legal authority, even though, who's drawing them up based on who actually makes them official, just down the road, because I think we're gonna need to know that.
Okay, thank you.
Just a thought on that.
And Ms. LeBlanc.
Ms. LeBlanc?
Yes, thank you. And while you're doing that research, because when we're talking about redistricting and drawing the lines and what have you, I'm sure public input would be involved in that. So as far as a time, a projected time limit, as far as how long this would take, which would then come into the discussion with the terms and what have you. So all of that, and just making sure that all of that would be included so that the voter would know when they're making that vote that all of this would be part of it.
Part of it, yes, ma'am.
Mhm. Okay, thank you.
Yes. General Lawrence?
Yeah, when we get to that point, we're not at it today, I understand.
Right.
But when we get to that point, it may be useful to create a subcommittee and go talk to Orleans Parish and Jefferson Parish, because they went through that, particularly Jefferson probably most recently. Because that also, that also includes other possibilities like at-large councilman. There's a lot of pieces, parts to that. And maybe going to talk to some people that have already done it would be helpful.
I agree, certainly. One of the things that we discussed was, most recently was St. George just did a charter for the whole new government there. So I think we've gotten some copies of that. Joe was able to facilitate that, I believe. And I would ask you to look at that too. But I do agree. I've given some thought to subcommittees. I just want to be very careful to make sure that there are public meetings that everybody is invited to if we go in that direction. So I have some mixed feelings, but we can further discuss that. Arthur? Oh, I'm sorry, I turned you off.
No, mine just, ours just stay on.
Oh, okay. So you didn't have anything? Any other questions?
No, sir.
None? Public, any questions? None. Thank you, sir.
Thank you for your time.
I guess you're going to get with the council's counsel, and she'll probably be handling the request, I assume. Great, thank you.
Thank you, Terry.
And now we have a guest, David Marcello, Public Law Center at Tulane Law School. He and I spoke on the phone, and he's done a lot of charter work, and I asked him to come and speak to us as we're just trying to gather information and be better informed for these discussions.
Right, well, great. I'm happy to be here. It's a great civic endeavor that you are all embarked upon, which is the euphemism that says there's no money in it for anybody serving on this commission, just a lot of pro bono time, but gratifying. I spent the better part of a year with our charter revision project in New Orleans back in 1994, and then another year in 95, leading up to approval in 96. Approval in 95, effective date in 96. And it's a worthy enterprise that I think you likely look back upon with a lot of pride to have been part of it. So thank you for having me here to talk today. I'm not going to use a PowerPoint, although I'm well acquainted with them in my law school classroom. It's the modern equivalent of the law prof's old yellowed notes. I'll spare you the PowerPoint today and just sort of riff on what we did right and what we did wrong, things we might have done a little bit differently in the rearview mirror. The thing that I will say was greatly important for us was staff. We had a great deal of support from the City Council staff in New Orleans, and I chaired the Charter Revision Advisory Committee, but leaned heavily on a lot of the folks who had been around the innards of city government for a lot of years. I want to talk mainly about process. I'm not inviting engagement in the substantive issues that you all will deal with here in St. Tammany, but perhaps from the process there are some elements of commonality. We had 3 failed attempts to modify the Home Rule Charter in New Orleans by notable mayors, Moon, Dutch, and Sidney. And there were some common elements to why those initiatives failed and others that were unique to them. I mean, in Moon's case, he did it very late in his second term, and the ballot proposition never happened. It never went to the voters. In Dutch's case, it was also late in the term. It was fatally wrapped up in the politics of just one more term in office, and that handicapped the charter initiative. And then in Sydney's case, there were, I think, 5 ballot propositions, 4 or 5. And the comment about multiple propositions is certainly an alternative, but one that you'd want to give an awful lot of careful thought to, because I believe in New Orleans the presence of that much choice on the ballot was a complicator that impeded voters' willingness to engage with it and deeply understand it, and so the simple vote in those circumstances is a no. That one, I think, was unique to the Barthélemy administration, but what was common to all of those efforts was that they took place late in the term of a particular office holder. I was engaged with Mark Morial's effort, and one of the very smart things that Mark did after having campaigned on it was to take it up within the first 3 months of his administration. He appointed a 38-member Charter Revision Advisory Committee. It was, again, an advisory committee. Everything that we proposed had to go to the mayor and be vetted, and in fact wound up, ours looked not much different from this, but it was a redlined copy, and this is the mayor's redlined copy, accepting most of what we had recommended, but making several changes. And then, of course, that in turn had to go to the city council for its review. So the mayor advised us at the earliest meeting in Gallier Hall to think about avoiding hot-button issues. It's a judgment call. There are some important things you want to get done. There are other things you might want to get done, but in the mayor's judgment, it was best to leave them alone. The idea of one land-based casino in New Orleans, for example, was not something that we wanted to revisit. The road use and real property service charges that Mark's dad, Dutch, had instituted were wildly unpopular and were prohibited in the charter without a vote of the people. That was another one that Mark suggested we just leave alone, don't try to do anything on. And the 2-term limit that had been put into the New Orleans charter not too many years before. That was also something that we were not invited to get too engaged with. We started by looking at what others had done. The League of Women Voters of New Orleans had looked at charter revision. The Business Council had had a charter revision study done. The consistent theme seemed to be the need for more flexibility. Our charter had a given number of departments. It was effective in 1954, so you can just think about the things that came on the scene in the remaining 40 years after that, and it had not been significantly amended. You had things like OSHA that were nowhere to be seen when the 1954 charter came up. So we were looking for ways to make it a little more adaptable without having to go back through the home rule charter revision process. We started out in October with our first meeting of the Charter Revision Advisory Committee, and we moved really quickly. By December the 15th, we had the Citizens Charter Revision booklet recommended. I don't recommend that level of speed. You all sound like you've got a much more appropriate time frame. It takes a while to talk it all through. We made a decision very early on in our deliberations that we were going to make decisions as we went along. And we were going to put, in essence, brackets around those decisions, because some of what you do in the early sections needs to be reflected upon further when you make decisions further down the road. And that really worked fairly well for our group. Nobody objected, since we had stated the principle at the outset where you're going back and trying to reopen a contentious decision that we had debated previously. We just had a shared understanding that we were going to do that as the needs arose. Charter revision broke down for us into 3 or 4 phases. Phase 1 was the work of the Charter Revision Advisory Committee. All of our meetings were held publicly, as yours are. All of our documents were regarded as public documents. We did one thing a bit differently. We had committees, about 6 of them, I think. I don't know that that's part of the plan here. The subcommittees or the committees also met publicly, and we recorded the sessions. We boxed up a lot of the materials and sent them to the New Orleans Public Library at the end of the process because it's a useful archive. And our process of delving into the meat and potatoes of the charter revision process took place over October, November, and by the middle of December, we had our recommendation for the mayor. Phase 2 was the review by elected officials. In the first instance, the mayor's review and some revisions made. And then this document, the mayor's recommendations for amendments to the charter, went to the city council, and their review took place. And that concluded, the mayor's report was sent in the middle of March 15 in 1995. The council's review concluded on August the 17th of 1995. And phase 3 was the public information campaign. That had essentially been going on since we began meeting in sessions like this, but we wanted to have a much more targeted effort to deal with the press, press briefings, and with the public in a series of forums that we did during phase 3, which took place leading up to the vote on charter revision, which in our case was November the 18th of 1995. We had a 68 to 32 favorable 2-to-1 majority, so that was gratifying. We then entered into the phase 4 implementation process, and I said I was going to share some of the things we did right and some of the things we did wrong. One of the things we did not plan for sufficiently was time required to get a whole host of things done. Our plan had been that by December 15th, we would deliver it to the elected officials, and that they, during the first quarter of 1995, would review and revise appropriately, and that we would make a July of 1995 ballot. And as all of you likely know, there's a great deal of lead time getting onto the ballot. The mayor took longer to review our recommendations than we had anticipated, from December 15th to March 15th. The council, correspondingly, took longer than we had available, so we missed the July ballot date. It went on in November. It had a great outcome, November the 18th, 2-to-1 victory. And time enough, though not a grand amount of time, to get it all done by July 1 of 1996, which was going to be the effective date. Right before Thanksgiving of that year, Harrah's dismissed 2,500 employees after having gone to the legislature in the spring of that year and getting a reduction from a $100 million a year commitment to $50 million a year based on the number of jobs and the economic boost that they were going to bring to the Parish of Orleans. 2,500 employees dismissed right on the brink of Thanksgiving just absolutely sucked the wind out of charter implementation. A lonely group of us were dealing with it in the remaining month and a half of the year. The city council was consumed with, how are we going to not let this ever happen again? So that was an unanticipated consequence, but we should have anticipated more than we did, the amount of time necessary to take those worthy recommendations, prep government to receive them and adapt to them. And so be generous in the planning at the end of the process. We did a page of highlights. It would be unfair to expect anyone to read this. Probably the members of the press will read it because it's their job, and maybe the Bureau of Governmental Research will read it. But for others, you've got to have a one-pager of highlights that you think need to catch their attention and that might help in getting the job done. And that'll vary, obviously, from parish to parish. We had, among the things we mentioned, addressing moratorium ordinances, which had been used frequently willy-nilly to sort of indefinitely delay projects, and we wanted to address that. We set up a revenue estimating conference. We added a requirement for competitive selection of professional services contracts. In the 1954 New Orleans Home Rule Charter, there was no restriction on the award of professional services contracts. You could give a contract to your brother-in-law and couldn't nobody raise any objections to it because that was the way the charter was written. Public bids, those were regulated, the kind of thing where you open the envelope and you're trying to buy these, and whoever bids the lowest unit price gets the award. But professional services, if you want your bridge to stay up, you may not want the lowest unit price from the engineering firm. So we took on those things. We did some ethics initiatives. We created authority for an ethics review board and an Office of Inspector General. We actually put into the charter about 4 pages of detail on the ethics review board and how it would be composed, and on the Office of Inspector General and what its powers would be. When it hit the council, there were those who thought that's a great concept, but it's like, going in with a Great Dane and coming out with a Dachshund. I mean, it shrunk down from multiple pages to the council may create an ethics review board and likewise an Office of Inspector General. That was business that waited another dozen years post-Katrina to get taken up. And that was certainly a fair call on the part of the elected officials not to say we're going to accept these recommendations and put them into play immediately. But there is that possibility of lag time between what you conceive of doing and how ultimately, as it's filtered through the political process, that comes out. One of the other things worth thinking about is state legislation. Is it going to require any modification of state law to get some of the things that you want to accomplish done? If so, then you want to start running on a parallel track when that becomes apparent. So those are my rambles through the Orleans Charter revision process. We, as I say, had a campaign that built up to 1994 with a commitment to do charter reform. The mayor stepped off briskly with his 38-member advisory committee. You've got more manageable numbers, and that's probably real good. And we got our work done in a very short period of time, but it takes a while to get a 2-to-1 vote of approval with a lot of public participation along the way and a lot of public official buy-in, which was absolutely vital. We had a unanimous vote out of the city council when it got put onto the ballot. We had good support in the press, another very important element, obviously. So I'm happy to answer questions.
Great, thank you. Mr. Rollins, Councilman?
Yes. Thank you for being here. We appreciate you being here and some of that input. Education-wise to the public. So once the council decided they wanted to do this, what did that look like as far as like getting it out to the public? Because that's what it's all about. I mean, we could work this for a year, and then we have kind of the working elements. We bring it to the people, the council does on a ballot. So what did that look like as far as timing? Because obviously it was successful, which is great. What did that really kind of look like? And I know from the 90s to now, money-wise, to advertise this in a way that we need to do it legally. I was just curious, kind of the timing on that, before the vote.
We did it in a really old-fashioned way. I'm sure there are online mechanisms today that would dictate a different approach, but we had forums. We moved around the city and met in public locations, school cafeterias, and some churches, and the council chamber at one time or another. We made it a point to run those at different times of the day, evenings, late afternoons, sometime during the day. And we also relied on the press to get the message out. They covered all of the council sessions, and we got editorial conferences that led to good editorial support.
Good, thank you. Appreciate it.
Great. Any other questions, comments? Thank you. I'm sorry, Mr. Phil?
May I?
Yes, certainly.
Hold on, Pat, press the button in front of you. Go ahead.
If I may, we sort of, with this gentleman here, you're talking about maybe downsizing or adding to the council. May I ask him a question about that?
Sure.
Okay. When you started the process, you had the number of original people on the council, and you went to B. So the number you went from 2. Then the number of admin people that were brought on after that for each person, each council member, and then the total admin people, and the cost of that. In basically the total cost, did it increase everything? Did you, and I guess you'll tell us if you downsized or increased the number of council people. So trying to see the number of people you went from to and the cost from to. Well, we, and I didn't mention this, were counseled by Mark Morial to avoid another hot button issue, which is changing the basic structure of government. And I knew that you all are considering that, and so I didn't want to complicate it by mentioning that that's one that we avoided. We took the 5 district council member, 2 at-large member form of government with a strong mayor commitment, and just pretty much left that in place. Later, there were modest changes made that took 2 council at-large positions that ran in a wide open field and made them the A and the B at-large council seats. And we're going to see that dynamic play out this year in municipal elections. But that was, we didn't, the expansion of council resources was not part of charter revision, but rather just part of a sort of independent city council initiative that had really begun in a serious way in Dutch's term as mayor. That's when the council acquired its own in-house lawyer council. And the mayor had instituted the executive council role when Dutch came in. And that's how it's evolved since then. We've still got in-house counsel for the city council. We've still got an executive council for the mayor. And of course, the law department and the city attorney that represents the corporate body, the city of New Orleans. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Ernst?
Yeah, thank you for that presentation, that's helpful. My question is related to the Ethics Board and the OIG. There was a period of time from we all finished your work until it was finally implemented, you said after 12, 14 years after Katrina. Now, New Orleans, in my view, has the model for an OIG and Ethics Board.
Say again, is what?
New Orleans has what I believe is a kind of a model for an office of an OIG.
Good.
Okay? So how did you all come to that model?
I'll tell you a long story that has a little bit of a humorous punchline, not so humorous perhaps. One of our committees was chaired by Gary Gresh, who was the chair of the Alliance for Affordable Energy. And Gary was a very forceful advocate for efficiency in the energy sector. And he did a deep dive with his committee into Office of Inspector General opportunities elsewhere. There is a National Association of Inspectors General. There are lots of good models. I think New Orleans leaned heavily on Miami when it implemented its. So the deep work was done in committee. It attracted a good bit of notice, and we thought it was a real powerful selling point to assist in the passage of the overall charter. I mentioned that there had not been a whole lot of time left to do the implementation in a month and a half at the end of 1995. 3 weeks into 1996, the City Council took up as a routine matter the renewal of the contracts for its utility consultants who guided the council as the regulatory body over Entergy. And at that point, Gary Gresh said, no, 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 we now have a competitive selection of professional services requirements in the charter, which was true. And a great brouhaha ensued that ultimately led to the Alliance for Affordable Energy filing a lawsuit against the city council. And, hard cases make bad law. In this case, the courts held that there was a grandfathering provision that had been created by the city council saying, if we had them working for us before, we have the option to continue them working for us now. And that was a sort of one-off that hadn't been written into the charter revision process, hadn't been planned for very well by the city council, and was a pretty large train wreck. It did not, however, impede, it probably helped to sideline ethics reform for a bunch of years because the council felt that they'd been, embroiled in something that they shouldn't have been required to deal with. So when it finally did happen, it was viewed as a wise response to the difficulties of Katrina and the amounts of federal money and other assistance that were going to be flowing into Orleans Parish and city government. And there was a mood for creating watchdog agencies. We did a search, hired Bob Sarasoli out of Massachusetts. Bob was the kind of personality who brought a lot of people together. I mean, he really deliberately set out to build a base of support broadly across the community and succeeded. There was that period of time when the Ethics Review Board was getting underway. They chose the Inspector General. So I would say we got to where we got with an awful lot of labor when the moment of implementation came. There were so many things that had to be drafted and procedures worked out. I had continued the Public Law Center's role as pro bono counsel to the ERB and the OIG when they were just getting underway. So, and in fact, I shared with Christine an article that I leaned on for the early part of this presentation. It's about charter revision in New Orleans, but it's specifically about charter revision and ethics reform. And the latter two-thirds of the article probably are about when we kicked off the Ethics Review Board and the Office of Inspector General. So I don't know, but they may share that article with everybody.
We'll share that.
A follow-on, if I might. In the interim between you all finishing your work and the time when they got approval for the Ethics Review Board and the OIG, what were the primary reasons for resistance? Other than, I understand the process, it's kind of laborious, but what were the primary reasons for pushback by anybody?
Well, as I say, it had been reduced from a charter mandate with its own structure to a council prerogative. And that inevitably raises very fair questions about funding. And the will to fund an OIG and an ERB really was not there in the early going. Ultimately, the ethics bodies were able to win, I think it was a 0.35% of the operating budget. So there's a fair amount of money that derives from that percentage. I've forgotten the details, but around 0.35% of the operating budget. So, several millions of dollars that help to support their operations.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Laughlin?
Yes, sir. I just had one other question. I know the structure of New Orleans is different from ours, but y'all's process required, because it was the mayor's committee,
It
that
was,
it went back to the mayor for review, and then the mayor would submit it to the council.
Yes. And then the council reviewed it and made changes of its own. One other interesting feature was that we had determined we were going to do a gender-neutral draft, which probably sounded controversial back in the 1990s, but if you do it right, nobody knows that you've done it. You don't put in things like, I'll be your wait person tonight, I'll be serving you tonight. There are a lot of ways to avoid the sort of honking red lights that tell you we're going to be politically correct about gender-neutral drafting. So we did it with 2 exceptions. There were 2 areas where we got into a really time-crunched situation, and we were having trouble figuring out how to render it gender-neutral without being awkward. So I just said, let's leave it, move on, let's get the thing in. 2 of the council members, Susie Hike Terrell and Peggy Wilson, called us down on it when we were presenting the thing and said, we've seen a couple of instances in here where you use the male pronoun to mean everybody. And we said, well, you're right, we'll go back and take another look at it. So it was a great lesson in gender-neutral drafting. If you do it right, nobody notices. If you do it only partway right, look out.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions, comment? Well, thank you. We really appreciate you coming.
Happy to
and
do
that
it.
Information.
And,
You did send that, and I'll get it out to the committee members. I just got it. The legal ordinance and the ethics reform, which has the Office of Inspector General and all that information in here about how
Good.
you all
Well,
did that.
commend you all. It's great work.
Thank you so
Good luck.
much. We appreciate it. All right, we'll move on and we'll get ready. Let's see. We'll go ahead for discussion, the Article 1s. We talked about that last meeting, so if you all are ready, Article 1, the Home Rule Charter, Section 1-01. I hope everybody's read it and they got a lot of questions or no comments. Anything on Section 1-01, Home Rule Charter? Hearing none, we'll go to Section 102, Form of Government.
If I could make a comment about Section 1.
Okay.
So I don't have a comment about Section 1, just an observation. We are limited by just some certain rules when we compare ourselves to other parishes. For example, Jefferson and Orleans were both in existence prior to that constitution. So it's just more like kind of like legal technical stuff, but whatever changes we make have to be, I want to say, subservient to the Louisiana Constitution. Is that correct? Do we have legal?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is correct. I went through it. I'm not sure what those differences are as I read them, but certainly we'll make sure that we don't go outside of that.
Staff has a question. Staff?
Mary?
Our legal counsel, Emmy Couvion, is going to be prepared to talk about that at our next meeting to go
Okay,
through
good.
what those differences
Good.
are.
Form of government. Today we have a Chief Executive Officer, President, Council form. There are several different types of forms. Is it wishes of the committee to have some people come and speak in reference to different forms? Any thought, any discussion? I'll wait for the lights to light up. None?
Mr. Shane?
Mr. Shane?
Yes. I think it would be good for our process to have maybe Ms. Couvion or someone at least enumerate the other forms of government and just give us a brief education,
Okay.
so that not only for our benefit as a committee, but for those in the public that are following our work, know that we've been exposed to other forms of government, and then we'll see where that takes us,
Yeah.
Staff has a question.
particularly the manager.
The manager in particular? There are several that I know of. I mean, I was on the original charter when we went from police jury to this form. Now, I know there's been some revisions or attempts at revisions previously, but that was really the heavy lift to go from the police jury form to this form. And back then, the thought and discussion was to make a strong executive branch. And, you know, I think what we got to really do is kind of be frank in reference to some of what we have seen, or either the public has seen, in reference to the strong and the council really doesn't have a lot of authority. I've been to meetings where I see the council say, well, I can't get this information, or I'm not authorized to get the information. which I think lends to some issues. That's not accusatory, I'm just saying I have seen it, so I don't know. I tend to agree with Jeff. There are different forms, or there's a potential that you could possibly have the council have more authority in some of the decision-making that they don't have today. I certainly open it up for members who have experienced that. Ms. Stearns?
Because it's been my observation, exactly what you just said. The council is not a co-equal branch with the executive. And I think if we could do anything to sort of level the playing field between the council and the executive, the budgeting process is a good example of that, okay? I think if we can do anything with that, that would be helpful.
And I don't know, Mary, were you going to say something? I'm sorry.
Mary first.
Okay, just if you guys haven't gone to that last page in your packet, that will give you a brief overview. It's in everyone's packet of the different forms. It's from the police jury's website, so you can see which parishes or which forms, and gives you a little bit information. If y'all are interested in hearing about the forms, I have already reached out to Debbie Henton. She works for the Police Jury Association, and she is willing and available to speak at our next meeting if that's something you would like. Just letting y'all know that that's an option.
I see heads, so I think the committee really wants to hear from them.
All right, Councilwoman, I had a question, but then.
Go ahead.
Okay. I think we need to look at that right now. I know we've had some instances where we have made requests and even resolutions that we need certain information, and we did not get it. No offense to the administration, but you know, if we need information to make decisions and we do not get that information, we're kind of flying blind here. So I would like to see us look at the executive and the council, and maybe, as the general said, making it more even.
Okay. Mr. Laughlin?
Yeah, so I can share the frustrations of my colleague, Councilwoman Tanner. The current form that we are not co-equal. We are in a couple of ways more of an inferior branch of government, especially when it comes to budgeting. So, for example, for those who do not know, at the end of, or at the beginning of the fourth quarter, we are handed a printed book that is over 1 inch thick, which is akin to an old white pages, which is the budget. We are tasked with reviewing the budget analog. We do not receive a digital copy of it. We do not receive any type of prototype budgets before that time, nor do we have the staff or the ability to hire professional services to help us do that. And we need to do that within, Cheryl, correct me if I'm wrong, we have 60 days basically to get it done? Yeah, 90 days to get it done with no staff and no technology. Mr. Impastato, did your light on? Did you want?
I concur with what the general said and both you all said. I don't think I need to repeat it. But I was out for a second. Did you talk about speakers that we were trying to get to come here? Mm-hmm. So I know, since St. George just did their charter, I think it'd be great if we can try to get someone that helped architect that and they've had the benefit of seeing so many other ones. It'd be a great group to give us a presentation.
Yeah, I think St. George is a manager type. It's a council with a manager. They have a mayor, but the mayor typically is not doesn't run the government. So I think that'd be a good one to look at. And please, I know we got members here that from the administration. It's not. We're just having an open discussion about the items that we think need to be reviewed. I know, and we have the legal counsel here too. I found it really interesting when there was a conflict. And we thought when we wrote the charter we had worked that out, but evidently we didn't. There was a conflict recently, a year ago, and the council hired their own legal counsel, which by the charter says they can do that. And my understanding is that the administration didn't really think that that was appropriate, so there's a big conflict there. I don't know if your legal counsel that did all that work has ever been compensated for the work that they did. Okay, so it tells me, again, all personalities out of this. I'm just saying that what that tells me is there is a problem. If the council by the charter does something, then we need to make sure that it's in simple language so that you'll have the authority to do that. Mr. Sims, DA?
Yeah, I think that particular issue came less from legal representation and more from what can be contracted without the executive's approval. So it was more about retaining professional services and who can contract for those services was less than the actual legal representation itself. And then the scope of independent, the scope of what the council can do outside of getting executive approval by way of conducting an investigation and/or mounting legal challenges and things of that nature. So I think it became more what can be contracted unilaterally by one side as opposed to the actual legal representation. A conflict did develop at a point in time, but that was separate than what at least what you're hinting to regarding the services of a particular attorney that I think that have been pointed out to is whether or not they've been paid or not. The scope of what he was engaged in, could that scope of work be engaged in unilaterally? Where did it start and stop? That was the particular issue.
Yeah, well, okay, from what I watched and saw happen, we thought we wrote the charter that gave the council the authority to hire outside legal counsel for specific issues, and they had to vote. Did they not vote?
Yeah, it wasn't
Okay.
written the way it needed to be written in order to have that be clear.
Okay. So it's an interpretation right at this point of what happened in the charter that gave somebody a conclusion that they couldn't do what they did, or that the administration
As far
says,
as-
we don't have to follow what you did.
Yes, the length at which the exact things that person could be doing contracted to do and where that started and stopped, and beyond that, which was more of a legal representation hat and not just an investigative mechanism.
Yeah, I wasn't trying to get into any of that side of it. I was just trying to clearly understand that the council, the intent was that the council could hire its own legal counsel for specific issues outside of, which took a vote of the council to do that. So we need to clarify it, is what I'm hearing.
I'm just commenting about that particular
Yeah, because
circumstance.
it's,
Yes,
yeah.
sir.
So what you're telling me is,
Oh, sorry, thank
as
you.
a layman,
Appreciate you.
the administration decided that the council didn't have that authority.
There was an issue as to, there became a specific issue as agreeing to the contract and the hiring for services, as I recall, and it was not signed and executed. And then the scope of what that person can do, if that wasn't executed, very specific, different than the other issues that also developed, which also created a conflict that require us to manage things
Good.
differently.
That's
Part of
good
it was
to know.
also,
That's good to know
and
so
to be
that-
honest, there was also a management issue on our part that I think we've rectified moving forward for not that specific issue, but just handling general conflicts when it comes to council business versus executive business.
Okay. So without going into a lot of detail, so now there's a new kind of policy in reference to what happens?
Not in the charter and the running of government, but how we manage business and anticipating conflicts when two different branches are at odds
Okay.
on either particular issues or other things.
Yeah. Arthur?
So I think to give it more of a generic description of what happened, I think for the first time, we had a conflict between the two branches of government, but we also wanted to exercise our investigation. We wanted to use our investigation power, which I understand had never been used before, and there was not a clear path in the charter. So I think this is a space that we might want to look into, basically listing the powers and of the tools that are available to the council if they want to launch an investigation in the future.
Good.
In this 10 years next.
So it's probably going to have to make some language changes there too then?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Ms. Tanner?
Yes, I think that we really need to focus on what the council needs, what tools they need to be able to do their job, and if it requires some amendments to the charter, then I think we need to look at that. It's one thing to sit up here and take a vote, but if it's not going anywhere, then there's no use in doing it. So I would like to recommend that we look at all the tools necessary for the council to do their job.
Yes, thank you. So I think that's why it's important to either, to look at the makeup, be it what type of form that would be best suited for St. Tammany for the future, be it what it is today, and then try to make some amendments. So I think we'll go ahead and ask those people, Mary and Kristen, if we'll go ahead and ask them to attend our next meeting, which is at night, the next one, so it'd be a good opportunity for the public to come. Certainly, we can go through this, and we'll just come back to the form. Mr. Sims, do you?
I think you guys actually have identified a speaker on each potential form already, to include, obviously, the one that's not listed as, other than in St. George?
So I believe when I talked to Ms. Henton, that because she works with all the forms of government here, that she can address each specific form.
Sure.
And I think I want to make sure we're all clear. There's forms, and then within the president, council, or the council manager, you can have different balances of power. So I think we have to make sure we're talking about, clear what we're talking about when we're talking about it. So I think
agree.
it'd be good first to have, let's just learn about all the forms from her and kind of get an idea, and then maybe dig into the others with someone else, if y'all feel that's appropriate.
So I guess
Yeah.
starting off with the educational component and then following it up with maybe people that have made the shift, the
Yes.
roadblocks and the hurdles they went through to get to something that then looks appealing to the body.
Exactly.
Sounds good.
Yeah, because it is complicated. You have the forms, you could just go along and we could skip that and go start adding, section this and we want to change something. You know what I'm saying? But I think in all fairness, we ought to at least have all the members up to speed on what different types there are and what they look like. And I know you made in reference to some of those other items. I think what we'll do is highlight them. I think evidently we made an error in investigations on section 2 that Ms. Tanner was just talking about, because we didn't give clarity, I guess, when we wrote the first original. So those are the kind of things that we really want to talk about so that we can try to fix them for all of you. Arthur?
And I also believe, if I could, to build upon what Councilwoman Tanner and Mr. Impastato have said, is thematically we would like to adjust the balance of power. That is one thing we want to keep in mind thematically as we go through all of this, because we think that might be one of the issues.
Yeah, certainly it seems that there's been some conflict over the years, so, and that's something that needs to be discussed. One of the other items, Mr. Impastato?
I was going to say, sometimes it's not even conflict. Like, I've had some issues where we don't have the ability to do it, but I think the administration would prefer for us to have the ability to do it. It's less taxing to them. We still get to accomplish the goal. So there's a lot of things that I think we're going to come across where I think
maybe
we'd all be on
conflict's not the
same-
right word. I
No, but
apologize.
sometimes it is. But
Yeah.
often it's just makes it difficult on us to do our jobs. Like, we worked on something with an ordinance that we were trying to create. Its initiative. Arthur and I talked about on a garbage study, and we could have moved faster if we would have had the ability to directly contract with a consultant to get us some information that we needed.
Yeah.
And I know the administration would have no issue with us doing that directly.
I'm going to
This is
stump our DA, I'm afraid, because I'm kind of lost now. It is kind of my thoughts that we should hire somebody to help us through this process. We did that when we did the first charter. I've talked to both council teams and asked them about that. They have so much to do. This is going to get a little complicated. If we're actually gonna have to write text where we change it, or the vote, and how we do that. I think we need some professional to help us develop this. I don't know what the other members think. I'm not going to write it. I'm going to tell you, I'm not sitting here to write this, and I don't expect any other member to write that. What your job is to bring the ideas forward, have an open discussion with the public, and then vote on those, and if we move them forward or not. We need some help. So with my earlier conflicts, and I apologize if I didn't say it correctly, how do I get us to that point? How do I get us to a point of being able to hire somebody if the administration says, well, they don't have the authority to do that, or we don't have the authority to do that? Is that?
I think Colin, if you don't mind.
Wait, we have to follow order really quick. So Colin was next, but President Cooper hasn't spoken, so by rules, we should let her speak first.
I just wanted to give y'all some insight into what happened last time, because I was very involved in the charter review process last time. At that time, I was with the DA's office representing the council. That charter review committee actually hired a parliamentarian. So they did have a professional parliamentarian. I'm not sure what department that contract fell under. I'm sure we can find that. And the DA's office actually did handle the writing. It was me. I will say that that was a very overwhelming task. And at the time that I was doing that, I would have preferred if we had hired our bond counsel to do this, because putting these items on the ballot is very specialized. Unclear to me why at that time they chose a 26-year-old brand new attorney to be in charge of it. I'm fully traumatized by that. But it is possible to be done in-house. It is a tremendous amount of work. I would recommend to y'all that you explore looking at bond counsel or another similar. I would recommend you use bond counsel. The process looks a lot like putting a tax initiative on a ballot. You have to get approval from the Secretary of State and the AG's office. And so I think that that's probably something that's very worth your time looking into. The parliamentarian handled all of the documenting of all the meetings. It worked out really well. It kept the meetings in order. And it's a lot of work to try to get that stuff on the ballot in-house.
Yeah, I do understand that. Let me simplify it in, let's say we agree with everything in the charter, but there's one. We're going to make them 18 members. So that would be our vote. We voted, we send it to the council. They, in turn, will do all that research, because they're going to have their bonding counsel make sure that we can put it on the ballot and the such. So my question was, I'm not sure that we need the skill set that'll help us through this process. Now, we've had this discussion. If you all say no, we're just going to wing it like this, we'll wing it like this. But I think we need somebody. But now I'm wondering, how do we get there? If we went to the council and said, look, we want you to hire A, B, C, X, Y, Z, or somebody, is that another 60, 90 days, 3 months to get?
So I think I'm probably the best person to do the procurement process, because this would just fall under our normal procurement process. So after our last meeting, I anticipate that this might be an issue again, as we saw how that went. I'm trying to identify money in our budget, because obviously we did the budget before we knew this was an anticipate, but I think there are ways we can do, and we can be able to handle that through the council office. So part of that process will be, we will have to put together a scope and then give it to outside vendors, and then we'll kind of get an idea of how much the price is. Based on the price per our procurement manual that was passed by council, there's different thresholds for how much money something costs. So some things just require a requisition. That's very easy and can happen in a day or two. Other things take a little bit longer. I think the first step is, if y'all want to do that, is to decide on that scope and what we really like them to do, or who would
Yeah.
be the appropriate
I
vendor.
didn't come to this, I'm sorry, Mr. Sims, I'll get to you, you're next. I didn't come to this conclusion just out of the blue, because I told you all, PAR, Public Research Council, who is a non-political group, the public trusts their policies and decisions that they have made, has said they can't do it for free. I mean, they can't do it at all because they don't have the bandwidth to do it. So I personally and the staff was trying to find some groups, BGR, Bureau for Governmental Research, somebody like that who could help us, but all of them seem to be unable to assist. So then we go to...
Yeah, we think, one thing I would say, I think some of that may be premature until we start looking at the different forms of government, assess like which way we're interested in heading and the scope of what that undertaking would look like to shift from that. If at the end of some of this, we're listening to things and they're small changes that we're going to make, I don't know if that's necessary. When they were doing it way back, they were overhauling and coming and moving from a police jury system to a parish government form of government, right? I don't know if we're talking about monumental shifts here, or if we're talking about tweaks to our current existing system. I think the scope of work would be a lot different depending on what we hear, what we're interested in undertaking and looking at, and the level and scope of overhaul.
I certainly agree. I made that comment. I said, let's say, for example, trying to not be controversial, we're going to increase it. And that's the only thing we had. Certainly don't need anybody.
No.
But what I've been told, or what I've heard and seen and read, is there are quite a few issues. And let's just be frank and honest, one of them is legal counsel. You know, when we wrote the original charter, we thought, what the heck, the DA was already doing it, just let the DA do it. I don't know if that's a consensus today. From what I hear, most people say, we shouldn't put you in that position, we shouldn't put you in that conflict like what happened a year ago. So maybe they should have their own legal counsel. And that's just one. There's many others. So I'm under the impression that it's more than just 7 members, 9 members, unless I'm wrong.
I don't know if you're right or wrong. I think it's premature at this point. So when we get there, I think we assess it and look at it.
But how do we get there if we don't have somebody assisting us to make sure that...
We're talking about two different things. What I was listening to over here was the scope of drafting a new form of government, the level of undertaking. We're sitting here as a review committee body, listening to the other potential forms of government and seeing which ones interest the majority of the committee to make some form of recommendation later to the parish council to see how they want to move forward. To the extent that we begin to do that, I think it would be prudent, if it's going to be a massive overhaul of what we're doing, to then contract for services if it's too large of an undertaking.
Yeah.
But I think it sounds like to me we're in the analysis review early phase of looking at what the options are, educating ourselves before we start spending taxpayer money on things. And by the way, taxpayer money which is sparsely available as we sit here and can't pay our current bills, to begin spending money unnecessarily at the outset to something we yet not know.
Yeah, and that's why I said that we were trying to find somebody like PAR or like BGR to help us, assist us.
Sure.
I don't know that we're on the same page, DA. I mean,
Probably
I
not.
just don't know.
I'm not on the page of spending money on things. When we're
And
sitting
I'm
here,
not
excuse
either.
me,
That's not what I'm
I just want to finish
suggesting.
first.
But I think at the
Can I
same
finish?
time, how do we get
I'll wait.
from point A to point B if we don't evaluate it?
I'm assuming that's
I've
why
had
we
meetings-
appointed all of us up here in our various experiences and professions to begin to review and look at the different forms and get a feel for a potential direction that we want to, again, advise only about what other people should consider, and then review the scope of work before we start looking at spending money first. For money, by the way, we can't pay our current bills right now. So not looking forward to contracting anything until we get an idea of where we want to go at this point in time.
Thank you. Arthur?
Just a couple of questions for clarity. Carlin, when you were on, that was the 2015 one that I think Councilman Stefanczyk was on that review board, and I think one of the winners on that one was term limits, correct? And for District Attorney Sims, one thing y'all are not privy to that the chair and I did in the background is we realized very quickly, just when we're trying to do our agenda setting meetings, that our staff cannot help us. Our first inclination was, and we agree with you, we went to the BGR and we went to PAR to kind of find two kind of professionals who could help us for free. Unfortunately, neither one of them can do that for us. I do think, and I also wanted to build on what Carlin had said, because it would be good, bond counsel does have that experience with working with different parishes, so they understand all this. So one of the one things we need to separate is we probably need some type of administrative support, and we're also going to need some legal expertise too. That might be a third party. If that is, Mr. Chairman, would you agree that there's both the administrative role to the support that we need, and also the legal aspect we're probably going to need too?
Yeah, I agree. I think we're probably, it doesn't sound like we're on the same page, but we are. I came up and met with them to said, okay, we're going to develop our agendas, we're getting ready to go. I said, are y'all going to have time to do all this? And I don't think they do. So I don't know what that means, how we facilitate that. Certainly the next meeting is going to have people come to discuss those different forms, because I think that's one of the items that we've talked about.
I'd like to take a stab, because I like a little bit of what I hear from everybody. Isn't that a nice middle-of-the-road comment? Well, no, but if you think about, we're struggling a bit, but we're a committee, and we're not a commission. I hope everybody has focused on that, because this is not a charter commission. It doesn't mean our job is less important, but I think the scope of our job is different. I hope this doesn't sound selfish, but I feel like the council determined that it wanted to create a committee to review and study the charter. I think the idea of hiring a consultant is probably a good one, but I would like the council to report to us if it believes it has funding within its budget to provide us assistance. Let's just see if they believe they have the ability, and maybe if so, how much. I realize we'll still have to go back to that tough question of who, when, is it now, is it later? But I think it's moot until we find that out.
Yeah, I agree. And I did just that, and they told me that, yeah, they thought they did. So that's kind of where we got to this point. So, but with that, is there any more discussion on the form of government other than having them appear next our next meeting? Hearing none? Okay. Do you want to go ahead and finish out these other two items, the boundaries? You've read this. I don't see any issues. Jeff?
I'm sorry to keep popping up.
Press it one more time, Mr. Shane. Sure. There you go.
I just want to keep learning. So, and maybe I need Mr. Menard, hopefully not. But, so I'm guessing though that, again, at some point we will have to be educated about how we would change boundaries as provided by law if in fact we recommended a change in the number of districts and or the addition of at-large. I don't need the hard answer today, but I throw that out there because it seems to me that that is kind of part and parcel of one of the central issues that we're going to be discussing in the months to come.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
my take on when the boundaries were basically were actual physical boundaries, you know.
well, I mean, I realize the parish geography is not changing as it relates to our
Yeah.
perimeter, but I was thinking that maybe with the research that we had asked Mr. Menard to look into, it seems an important part of that might be that if we did decrease the number of council members, how would that boundary change be effectuated by district? What process? And I believe it's going to be council, I understand that, but like, for example, I assume there has to be equalization of population or constituency
Yeah.
within the district seats, which is a precept of the Constitution, I understand that. But, for example, can an at-large serve for only the west side of the parish? And can an at-large serve for only the east side of the parish? Or must, if there were a suggestion of 2 at-large, do they serve parish-wide and be elected parish-wide? And again, I just think it'll help us to understand those building blocks as we discuss these items.
Yeah. No, good point. Good point. Arthur?
And I think my district is the shining example of this, and perhaps we can, to build on Mr. Shane's question, we just finished redistricting, so we have still very recent data from the firm we use to do the mapping and divide up the districts based off geography. And I think if we had them, maybe we could invite them to come represent what they found, and it might produce itself, it might be kind of self-evident to Mr. Shane's question, where we see how the population looks mapped out now in St. Tammany, because we have, I mean, there's a reason why my district stretches from Abita to Slidell. So, and the reason is it's just population. We had to move west to fill in. So I think if we start with that, we might have a better understanding of what the needs of the parish might be logistically.
Yeah.
And then
that's a
Ms.
good point.
Tanner's next.
Okay.
Ms. Sheriff?
Yes, a couple points I'd like to make. First of all, I think that we need to decide the form of government, which apparently we'll have next time. The other thing is, I've heard some indication of downsizing the council or at large or whatever. I have two particular problems right now that I have with downsizing. Number one, what's it going to do to the rural area? If you downsize, you're going to go by population. That means that the rural area is going to lose their representation, or it's going to be brought into the cities. We won't have representation. The second, you talk about downsizing, go to 7 members, 8 members. They'll probably be full-time. They'll need a car. They'll need 1 or 2 assistants. They'll need a building. You're talking about $1.5 to $2 million. Ladies and gentlemen, in case you haven't been listening, the parish does not have money. So where's that money going to come from? So I have very real concerns about downsizing, at large, whatever, okay? Now, in 1980, when they went to, what was it? There was police jury, went to a charter form of government. My husband was at large. He run parish-wide. Although he represented the parish, he got paid what the other districts councilman got paid. He spent more money campaigning, and he said, and he was working more, and he said, wait a minute, this is not getting it, So I think we have to look at just what we're doing and how it's going to affect the people of this parish. And for one, I have particular problems with the rural areas not being represented. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Ms. Tanner. Mr. Impastato?
I just wanted to say that District 7 is also somewhat rural, smaller, but it only doesn't have any municipal areas in it, so it's very dependent on whoever their council representative is. But I am really interested to hear from the different parishes and or even counties and organizations that can talk to us about other areas that have shrunk or reduced the size of council members, enhanced their ability, as well as also gives them, I know full-time is, full-time pay is hard for us to consider, well, we do have issues, we don't want to waste people's money, but it is a full-time job, even right now. So I'm anxious to hear a lot of input on that before we come to any conclusions.
Great. Ms. LeBlanc?
Yes, thank you. At this point, I'm hearing a lot of what happens if it's reduced or the numbers or what have you, but I'm really not hearing any information as to why the concern is there. How is it that we have been functioning with the number of members before, and now we are talking about the possibility of reducing the size? So I'd really like to hear more information about that. And the
Agreed,
reasons, let's talk about dollars and cents. I'm a numbers person, so if it's making sense and I can look at it and there is clear advantage to it, because I understand what you're saying, the rule, but let's face it, there are other populations, the underrepresented populations, that you have to consider. I appreciate a board or commission or anything that is representative of the population in which you serve. So if we're going to be talking about reduction, I'd like to also hear that counter as far as what's working now. Why are we holding this discussion of reducing the numbers? Let's put hard fact to the discussion, dollars and cents. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Laughlin?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. To answer or to provide a little bit more clarity on your comment, what you said was, this is one of the hot button issues for us. One of the problems, though, in terms of agenda-wise, is in Article 1, it's kind of like a theme. We'll get to the brass tacks in Section 2. Is that correct? That's where the actual issue comes up.
Yeah.
So I think right now what we're looking at is, and not to push my chairman under the bus, but 25 years ago when they were doing this, in order to avoid any controversy, they just said we have 14 police drawers, we have 14 council members. It just made it a lot easier. The most recent, and I don't want to get too far in the weeds, but like the most recent rededication, so I just experienced it. My first year on the council, I had Mr. Steve Stefanczyk's old district, Slidell, Hickory, Western Slidell, Hickory, Northern Lacombe. Now I have a little bit of Abita, a little bit of Covington, a little bit of Mandeville. I lost Hickory, I got Lacombe, and I have Slidell still. And the council districts are not the same. We have some council members whose almost their entire district is within a municipality. So in some sense, they're redundant, because when you call your council person for help, they just forward you to the city, because your road is a city road. It's not, so like for Joe and I, we both share, although we're not up in the north, both of our districts are entirely rural. We just happen to be kind of in the center, near cities, but not within cities. That's just one of the headaches that we're kind of experiencing. But as I said earlier, this is one of those things that's going to come up again in the agenda, and that's when we're going to have to get into the nitty-gritty kind of part of it.
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay. Am I still on?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, okay.
And to
Yes, I
Cheryl's-
actually live
Yeah, go-
in a neighborhood where
Right.
that is.
Is the case,
You
yeah.
know, the case. So I totally understand that part of it, but I just wanted it not to be confusing for the public, because
Right.
we're hearing a lot of the, information
I
and
don't
the
take-
communication is targeted toward
Yeah,
the
I'm not-
reduction, to let them know that that's not
Right.
a done deal now.
Yeah,
because
no, not
that
at
is
all.
something that is
Right.
going to be done down the road. But
If at all. Our issue
correct.
today is the form of government, the type,
exactly.
and it could it can still be the same as it is today, but a different
Absolutely.
form.
Absolutely.
So
absolutely.
that's kind of where
In
we're at.
Texas,
Yeah.
that was the form. We had the manager type
Yeah.
form.
There was
I
no-
mean, and I get it, but I just wanted the public, if they're looking at this
Yeah.
and listening, that they understand this is not a done deal. We still are going to be talking
we got
about
a long
that.
way. We got a long
Correct.
way. Ms. Tanner?
Yes, I would like to say one thing to Arthur. Arthur, I understand your district. Apparently, you were out of the room during all these redistricting meetings, because you really do have a screwed up district.
Ma'am, I wasn't in office. My predecessor,
I think
the
he
timeline was perfect.
passed.
Mr. Stefanczyk had passed away.
Yeah.
And Mr. Kirk?
Mr. Drum was the interim.
Well, then
He was
I
in his-
apologize.
He was
No
in
wonder.
his first
Okay.
year. And then when I got elected, I got handed, by the way, this is what you got to run for next year.
Fair enough. Okay.
Yeah, actually, Ms. Taylor, you know, just so you, I never received a direct from the parish council saying, this is what we want you to do. We never got that. What we got was review the charter. And to me, that meant everything. That's the way I'm taking it.
Keep my rural area or rural areas intact?
I was thinking you should have at least 2 council members for the rural area there. I know,
Mr. Sims has got his light on.
I'm sorry, Mr. DA Sims.
I know we're reviewing the home rule charter itself for just other forms of government. Is part of this going to be how all this is funded? Because I find like that is the, if it's not the biggest thorn, it's one of the things that continues to basically place all of the current form of parish government in a corner, almost to the point where it can't even function at this point. So we have these decisions that were made many, many moons ago with all these dedicated funds and all these little things and these balances build and it can't be touched, and the citizens, rightfully so, are upset about the level of taxing, but it's very hard to explain to everyone that these are decisions that were made before anyone was sitting here, and we've taxed ourselves into a corner for all these specific things that no one ever anticipated the funds would be at this level, and then where all the other entities, where they need funds, funds are not legally accessible to fund the things that everyone thinks we have the ability to do to function properly. So I hope that, and I know it's probably an addition or maybe an expanded mission of the committee, but also reviewing ways to undo all these dedications, maybe not all of them, but some of them, and get to a point where parish government, the council can manage budgets, effectively prioritize for the citizens and move things around. And someone, we were somewhere, actually I think it was President Cooper's wife, gave the perfect example of how silly and how we financially function is that there are 5 envelopes. I have an envelope that is the vacation fund. Not very critical, but we made a decision 20 years ago, put so much money in the vacation fund, and the vacation fund continues to grow. Meanwhile, my home insurance and my parish property taxes have gone up over here, and my escrow is deficient. Wouldn't it be nice to move the money from the vacation fund into my mortgage fund, but I can't do it because someone 20 years ago said, this is what this is going to be spent on regardless of need, and there it sits. It cripples, I think, our ability to function effectively and efficiently, and it's kind of like, I don't even know what form of government really works well in that type of parameter. So I hope that that's at least a dialogue and an educational process both for the public and for everyone else.
Yeah. Arthur?
I think, I'm not 100% sure, District Attorney Sims, but I agree with you on this. I think we've experienced, especially since the Home Rule Charter was written, we've experienced such unprecedented growth, but we've finally hit, and you and I experienced this past year trying to fix the budget with the help of Councilwoman Tanner and Mr. Impastato and my colleagues in the room. There was glitches because our form of government was still harkened back to, we still had the size of it maybe was back from the police jury, but the balance of power was, and it's not an attack on any administration, it's just a pendulum. We had 14 police jurors, which were like 14 kings, 14 or queens, 14, parish presidents with all the power in the legislative body. And then and I believe this is true, we switched it all to the absolute opposite. But at the same time, we've grown government, and we ran into our first major glitch financially these past couple of years, and we're identifying problems. So I don't know if the Home Rule Charter can answer any of those, but I do know the Home Rule Charter hopefully is the administrative part of the solution. What do we need to tweak government-wise to make it better?
Well, it's kind of like listening to some of the commentary about maybe some equity in the sides of government, right? Well, you would have a lot more authority and power if so many things weren't already decided for you over here, especially budgetarily. And the power of the purse is a very powerful mechanism when it's not so confined and strangled, and you really get to decide and prioritize for the people who voted for you what is important, and please help us govern to pay for the things that are vitally essential, and then scale it down. That's
Yeah,
it.
I think, I do have somebody from the audience who wants to speak. 1 minute, let me comment. I do agree, but I can tell you historically, if you didn't tell the public exactly what you're going to use the money for, they didn't get approved.
Sure.
That 2-cent sales tax that we put on the ballot, you all probably don't know this, we actually had books this tall. It listed every street in this parish that was going to be paved. So people took that list and went home and said, my road's going to be paved, I'm voting for it. So that's how we got to where we are today.
Yep.
Mosquito control, same things. Libraries, same thing. Every one of those, the public said, no, we don't really trust everybody to just give you a pot of money and you decide what's best for us.
Sure.
So that's how we ended up with where we are today. I don't think that that's a fault of anybody. I think that that's the public's telling elected officials, this is where we want our money spent in
Right.
this one, because look, we already did this 3 times on the ballot for all of this tax stuff, and it failed. So the public said, I'm not voting for that.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense until we're faced with the reality of the district attorney's office almost received half as much as animal
I
control.
agree with you. I'm 100% for you. I
Right.
want to make sure you get more
Right.
money, but
But it wasn't because I don't think anyone in the room wanted us to receive that low amount
Right,
of money.
right.
It's that it became, this is what's available, and these other things that maybe you'd say, and this is, I always apologize to the animal control people because I'm all for animal control, just to tell everyone, I'm very happy it's there. But when we're comparing things for public safety and vital essentials, when you start looking at, public safety, fire protection, education, all those things.
Yeah.
And when you look at it and say, wow, this is a decision that we cannot touch, and we can't fund the prosecution of cases, that's where I think it becomes problematic. I totally agree that people want to know what they're paying for very specifically, thumbs up, thumbs down, and don't want to give people a blank check. But it becomes very difficult. And so it's not a question of a lot of the agencies asking for more money.
Yeah.
It's that, please don't take half of my money away. And these guys can't do anything about it except for start picking and choosing things that start to fail.
Yeah. I apologize, ma'am. Come on up and speak.
My name is Kristen Luxinger, and I'm just a resident here in St. Tammany Parish. And as I'm listening, I also have probably in the last 5 years become a little bit more civically engaged, right? So I also am a co-founder of the Library Alliance. So we advocate, and that has kind of brought all of this to my attention of how government works. Because for some reason, I've lived in this parish for 30 years, and I just was like, oh, good, I trust all of y'all. Okay, what are we voting for? What,
Right.
okay, let's move on. I'm raising my kids. I'm trying to live
Right.
life, right? So once they graduated, I was like, okay, well, I guess I'm going to go find a life and figure out how this government works, how fascinating and interesting. So in the balance of all of this, I want to, just as a member, to remind you that we, the people, voted you in to make decisions based on what we think is important. So as much as I think, and I'm not, don't quote me on this, but I think that dedicating taxes to the DA was voted down in this parish. I don't remember if I voted yes or no for it, sorry. I was unengaged, but, so we have dedicated taxes that we said, yes, we want our rec district to have it. We want our fire, our schools. These are important entities that we want to protect, correct?
Yep.
And so what I'm seeing, just from my tiny lens of the library, is that we see other places redirecting those funds through ballot measures. I think as we go through this process, I would ask each of you, when you are making these decisions, and I know our judicial system is extremely important. I mean, that's my major in school. I understand that. But I think that we can have it all, but when the people speak and say, hey, this is what we want the money for this particular amount of time. We want to rededicate library funds for 10 years. Okay, the people have spoken. And I understand that the process is you can bring it back to a vote. But what is in the best interest of the entire parish? And getting people's opinions on, do we have what constitutes, why do you need, how much money do you need, and why? And I'm fairly civically engaged, and I don't know the answer to those two questions.
Yeah.
I just don't. I mean, maybe you can explain it to me later, but it's not been publicly posted that we're going to rededicate that 2%. What portion is going to be? So the education, I guess my whole point is the education of those of us who are actually paying attention.
Yeah.
Please make sure that it's clear. I mean, make it like a 5th grade library bubble. Like, get it nice and easy for us to understand.
Yeah, that's what.
So that's all.
Yeah, I appreciate your comments. Let me say that. Thank you so much. They are. You want to, Mr. Laughlin?
Yeah, ma'am, if you would stay up really quick, I just wanted to clarify a couple things. Number one, just for the record, 4 of us, or is it 5 of us? 5 of us are not elected officials that serve on this committee. They're just civilians who we drafted into this.
Yeah.
Right. The other
okay.
thing is, one of the things you touched on is super important, and you've touched on it. I was chairman last year. Under our current form of government, we did not know how much money we had as a councilman, as the chairman of the council. I did not know the budget until it is presented at that public meeting. That is the first time I get it, and I get it in a printed tome. I do not get an electronic copy. I do not get any pregame. I have no idea what's coming. And I was talking to, and I mean this in all sincerity, I was talking to the current mayor of Slidell, Mr. Borchert, and he laughed. And he says, Arthur, I didn't believe Chairman Airy 10 years, I mean Blanchard, when
Airy was chair.
Not Airy, his wife, when she served. She told me the same thing 10 years ago. And I laughed at her. I said, how do you not know? And then I confirmed it. I said, we're going into the budget, and I have no idea what President Cooper's going to, and it's not him, it's just the way the government is designed. We don't know. You're elected officials, and that's what we're critiquing right now. Let's take a look at our own government, put it under the microscope, and see where there's some problems with it.
Right. No, I definitely, that was something I was unaware of, which factored into that, for sure.
And unfortunately, this body doesn't have the authority in any rededication of taxes or anything.
Yes,
so, yeah.
no.
I know you were just making a general comment.
General comment
I appreciate it.
Because, Colin brought that up as in other dedicated, but I think we, the people elected to do that. I mean, voted to do that. So.
Yeah, and I think we all appreciate his comments in reference to his office needs to be funded.
Absolutely.
How do we get there? That's the question.
That's for y'all.
So, and that's not for me, that's for these other elected officials. Ms. Stevenson, I'm sorry, Ms. Cooper and then Ms. Stevenson. I mean,
Fitzmaurice for
Cooper on
Cooper.
here.
Yeah. I think we've gotten very off topic from 1-03 boundaries. But I did want to address something that Mr. Sims said. I don't think that there's anything in the charter that's going to be able to change, and you alluded to this, Mr. Davis, the tax propositions that were voted on years ago. The only way to change how we can use those taxes is to ask the voters again, which we are doing in March. If they say no, then that's the answer. Nothing in, and I see that in our packet. It goes a little bit into the limitations of home rule charters. If you look on page 4 and 5, it talks a little bit about taxation, and I presume that that's one of the things that will be discussed when that limitations on home rule charters and pre versus post 1974 will get into that taxation power. But certainly when you put something on the ballot in front of the voters, even if they voted 20-something years ago, look, I pay taxes in St. Tammany and I wasn't allowed to vote 20 years ago. But that's what the taxpayers have told us we're
I
allowed to
agree.
use it
I
for.
went ahead and let the latitude for the discussion, because I think it's healthy for all of us to have the discussion. So, like, she just learned a lot from the discussion of the DA and others about our processes. So, but I agree with you, it's not part of our, Ms. Stevens, you want to address that also, or?
I do.
Okay.
I agree that it's not appropriate for this particular body, so thank you for that. It's not something that the Home Rule Charter even has anything to do with. But if we're talking about dedicated taxes, then as long as a need exists for a dedicated tax, regardless of how long ago it was adopted, it should still be dedicated for that reason.
Yeah.
And any new taxes that are passed should also, if they are dedicated, using the school board as an example, if you've got something you need and you get a tax passed for it, there should be no consideration for rededication in any way, shape, or form. Could I also mention, just being up here, that, and I didn't know this was going to come up today, regarding an ethics, what was it called? An ethics committee or an ethics board? That's a really great idea, and I didn't know that was going to be
Inspector General.
part and parcel of the Inspector General.
Yeah, Inspector General, the way they created it somewhere else was they have a review board who monitors the OIG. So,
and would that be part of the charter, or potentially be part of the charter? Because
Yes,
that
ma'am.
would be a great idea to
yes, ma'am. It is.
consider.
It is part. We have discussed it openly already at our first several meetings, and several of us think it's very important and should be added. But we'll have to wait and see what the vote happens.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Mr. Ernst?
What they're looking at, Terry, is that the OIG part, which we're hoping to get a placeholder in the Home Rule Charter. But you need something above that that says, it selects the Inspector General, puts some guidelines in place, and just oversees what they do. And that's the New Orleans model that's in place right now.
Right, and that's fabulous. And I know you and I go way back, and it's been discussed for many, many years.
Yeah,
and, you know, accountability is really, really important.
Yeah.
And to have one layer above the council, above the parish president, the watchdog component is really critical. And I think there's a genuine need for it here in St. Tammany.
And
Great,
because it's ties to the state, if we're lucky, there'll be a bill proposed in the legislature this spring, that allows St. Tammany Parish to establish an OIG. That requires it, allows it. That would go to the parish government and then ultimately to the people to approve.
That'd be great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. DA, I got
Mr. Phillips.
Oh, Mr. Phillips.
I was just curious, if establishing the IG, would it cover the coroner's office, the sheriff's office?
I'm just going to give you my perspective. Now, the DA will probably jump in on it.
Okay.
Because I don't, here's my position as I remember. If we have an Inspector General today, they would have the right to go to the sheriff. They're going to disagree, I think. And let me explain why. And I think they can go to the DA, and I think they can go to mosquito control. They can go to fire districts even, if we had one today. Now, some people don't agree with that. The legal counsel had told me the other day, I said, well, we're not sure that's correct. I think it is, because anything that this parish government funds, the OIG has the ability to go and check it. Now, let's use the jail as an example. Today, I believe that if you had OIG, they could go do the jail. They couldn't go do what other taxes he collects. Common sense would tell me that he could do that, she or he. And you say, well, how do you make the leap to the other ones? Well, all the other ones we fund. The courts, do you not fund the courts? Right? You fund the DA's office, right? Only the part of the DA's office that you fund, they should have the right to do that. Now, I'm hopeful, I don't want to get into it today, I'm hopeful that legal counsel will review that and give us some direction, because I think if we ever get to a vote and we vote on that and ask that there be a OIG, we want to make sure that we're on the same page, that they have that authority. I've heard in the past that the opinion was, nope, they could only do parish government. I don't agree with that. So I'd like to have an opinion on that. Mr. Ernst?
And then staff.
if we're successful in getting the state legislature to do this, this law, and it passes and the governor signs it, that will provide that an OIG can follow tax dollars generated within St. Tammany Parish to their destination, which is really the underlying principle of what Mr. Davis is talking about.
I was just thinking, if it's not overarching, you're sort of limiting the IG. I know in the military, you say the IG's coming, he's looking at everything.
Right.
You know, so.
Yeah. But there is, and I agree with the legal counsel here that says we can't go do the school board. I agree. No questions asked, unless there was some law that allowed that to happen.
Okay.
So you need to know those parameters in my mind. Now, hopefully, what's her name, your legal? She's going to do some more research and get back to us on that.
Staff had a question.
Yeah.
Oh, staff had a question.
I was just going to clarify. I think my understanding when we talked to Emily is that she agrees we can, an inspector general can look as far as our funds go. So, for
So
example,
maybe we did agree then, I guess.
I think
okay.
so.
I'm
Yeah,
sorry. I
but
apologize.
We can't go into mosquito abatement, or we can't go to the school board,
Right.
or those, those other funding sources. But I think y'all were on the same page about
Okay.
as far as our
And that's just my thought. Now, I got to go back to somebody's comment earlier. And look, y'all need to tell me if I'm wrong. I'm not going at this what it's going to cost. If we got to go at what everything's going to cost, I don't know what we're going to do. There is a cost. If you want to do OIG, I'm going to pull a number, $500,000 out of today's budget, and I agree with the DA. That's a problem. But that doesn't mean that the public shouldn't evaluate that and then have a voice to say, but we want that. Do you agree? So I'm not, go ahead.
Well, just to build on what General Ernst is saying and what staff is saying, to answer it, I think it's nice, it's a great idea. What we're looking to do is a belts and suspenders approach. So if we do it home rule charter and just exclusively home rule charter wise, it only goes to the direct things we control. Like we can look at the coroner's office, maybe we can look at the district attorney. But if we partner with the state, then we're doing belt. Then we also have the benefit of having that, just like the military. The IG's coming, and that way it creates that authority. Right now, and it's one of the perceptions of what the government is. So a lot of people think that because, well, let's not say this body, but where we are, we're sitting in the seat of where the governing authority is. But we don't have authority. People think we do, but we don't have authority over stuff. So we can't, if you have a problem with the school board, or if you have a problem with the fire department, we can't investigate. So I think the IG, if we do it both ways, both local, parish, and state in tandem, we can create what you're asking about.
Great, thank you. Any other thoughts, discussions?
Mr. Ernst, General Ernst?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The reason we mentioned the New Orleans model, because the New Orleans IG office fell under the rubric, the New Orleans Home Rule Charter was in place before the Constitution. So they were grandfathered. They could do things that nobody else could do. So that's why we need something coming from the state that says they have the authority to do this, this, and this, and possibly even the school board. We don't know that for sure, possibly.
Yeah. I have one question. So next meeting, our evening meeting, we're going to try to get some speakers in reference to different governments. I just got it, and you know, I'd like for everything to be out on the open. I just got a text from a previous parish president in Jefferson. I know some of your colleagues have said we're trying to go back to Jefferson and Orleans. That's not what we're doing. All we're trying to do is look at different governments and how they operate and function. Tim Coulon was the former parish president of Jefferson. He was the CAO before he became parish president, so he ran the government. Is there any objections to having him also speak? Because he can speak on the government that the council has all the authority and the administration has very little. The council in that form of government gives out all contracts, all the members, they do all that. The administration, I won't go any further. So we're going to try to get somebody. Yeah. And is it okay if I ask Tim to come and speak on their form of government? Not that I'm saying we're going to do Jefferson's form. Okay. He just texted me, he said, I can come next Thursday if that's all right, or whenever the next meeting is. Any other members have any comments on who they would like to come? We're going to try anybody from St. George could come? Because that's the manager, mayor. It's a mayor. It's a city, but it's all the same, just different terminology. So that would give us 2. We know about this one.
Yeah. Tim Coulon, Deb Hinton, and somebody from St. George.
St. George, Tim,
And then Deb Hinton.
and Deb. Is that okay with the committee? Good. Is there anything else that we need to discuss? I don't think we really can finish this. We got to get this form of government done before we go any further. I do want to recognize that we got an email from a Jean, is it Hebert? She said, so people know we're trying to be open as we can. She sent an email. The email was basically, how do you get on this board? I think she was asking questions, so we'll respond to her email. I don't have any others that I'm aware of that have been emailed here.
That's the only one.
Yeah. So, anything else by the committee? Jeff, go ahead.
Mr. Chair. In section 1.06, does there not need to be some reference to CEAs with the private sector? Because I think that we have cooperative endeavor agreements that include the private sector.
Yes, I think it's what I'm discovering from now 25 years later.
No, I'm not correct. Yeah, I am corrected. I just learned that be patient and keep reading. We're going to see that later.
Yeah, because I think we ought to look at adding a little languages in some of these little paragraphs.
Right.
You know, and I know that we interpret that yes, we could.
Right.
But we don't want 10 years from now somebody else say, nope, you couldn't do that. So I agree with you, it should be.
Well, lawyers have fun with their conflicting provisions in
Yeah.
the same body of law, so
Yeah, and I think
whatever we decide to recommend, maybe we should be consistent throughout the
Yeah.
charter.
So we'll be still on the Article 1 next week. Anything from the public? Any comments? I don't hear anything. Could I entertain a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
So move in a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We're adjourned.
Thank y'all.